Should the government proceed with these plans to rebuild the Navy, or do trade-offs need to be made? Joining me now, the newly minted Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence, John McKay, just today named to that position, Conservative defence critic James Bezan, and the NDP defence critic Randall Garrison. Nice to see you all, gentlemen. Nice to see you all in the flesh, too, because you're back in town, which is great. So, John McKay, you have to start now. That's the way it goes. Yeah, you do.
Okay.
So the head of the Navy says the numbers are off, that these are going to cost a whole lot more than expected. Is the government still committed to 15 ships?
Well, my mandate is an hour old.
Yes.
And
life's going to be tough here, John.
Yes. And as James was talking about, these numbers, there's a lot of numbers floating around here. At this point, the number of 26 billion and 15 ships is the number that's in the current estimates. Whether if we have a sophisticated conversation, as the Admiral would wish us to have, then we do need to have that sooner rather than later. Sure. We are committed to replenishing the Navy. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about making improving the capabilities of our Navy, and we are committed to moving on that as quickly as possible.
Well, in fact, that was something that you made a point of saying during the election, right? That the focus was going to shift back into the Navy. So it's hard to see how you would pull. I mean, maybe you would pull away from that. But I wonder if, as the Vice Admiral was saying, there will be an issue up around the capabilities. So it's either fewer ships, or you have to reduce what's in the ship, because and then you're at a point where you're just painting the ships gray, right? So that conversation will have to be had. I guess.
But the costs of some of these elements that you put in the ship in order to be able to get to the capabilities some might think we need to have is a very sophisticated conversation, and it's very difficult when you're floating all of these numbers around to know what are apples and what are pears and what are oranges.
Yeah. James Bezan, the Vice Admiral had some tough words for your government and the plans that were put in place previously under your government. Did he or others raise flags, from what you understand, during this process about the potential of these prices skyrocketing like this?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate John on his appointment as Parliamentary Secretary. Working with Randall.
There's such a new tone. New tone for the next couple of days. Yeah.
At no time were we aware that there was going to be some major problems, as we're seeing right now with the doubling the cost of the ships. I think we want to see what this report has to say. Again, it's a report that CBC has that we haven't been party to yet and had a chance to review those numbers. And I think that we do need those numbers verified by the department itself.
Well, the Vice Admiral saying that they're accurate, that these numbers are accurate, according to him. So,
and what we need to do, though, is go through this process, as Parliament, as the new government has to look at, okay, this is what the costs are. If either there's misinformation coming in, or there was bad decisions made along the way. But at the end of the day, we do have a Navy that requires capabilities. We have to determine if the capabilities that they laid out there were in the best interests of the overall fleet. We want to have that blue water fleet that can be taken anywhere in the world, but at the same time defending the longest coastline in the country. And we do have time in this process, because we're talking about a procurement strategy that goes over 30 years, that was hailed across this country by all parties and all people that are involved in the Navy industry.
Perhaps, but it was hailed at a certain price tag, and now we're two times that.
But let's have this discussion now and look at, if we have to change budgets to match, how do we respect the taxpayers' dollars and still get the biggest bang for the buck, so that we have the Royal Canadian Navy doing the job that we asked them to do?
Okay, Randall Garrison, the NDP also had a national shipbuilding procurement strategy during the election. Where do you think this lands now? Do we need the ships at any cost, or is there a point where we have to scale back?
Well, what we've said all along is that if the Canadians are going to play a major role in the international stage, we need a robust Navy, and it has to have its equipment delivered in a timely fashion. So I have some sympathy with the new Liberal government inheriting a procurement process that hasn't worked well over the last decade. We've had constant delays. We've had cost overruns in all kinds of military procurement.
It seems like this always happens with procurement. So this is the regular story with procurement.
Well, it needs to be fixed, and I think we've seen some very positive things again from the Liberal government, saying that they're going to be consultative, they're going to be transparent, they're going to be open about this. And so I think they're going to see that the opposition parties are willing to engage in a responsible debate about this, because we all share this goal that Canada needs to play a role in the international stage. and we need a good and well-equipped Navy to do it.
Is part of the problem here, John McKay, not just that the estimates start to balloon over time, procurement is very complicated. Is part of the problem here that we are fixated on having a shipbuilding industry in this country? If we bought them from somewhere else, they'd be way cheaper. Why are we so fixated on keeping the industry itself alive?
Part of the issue is that we are building an industry simultaneously.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it's good for the local economies, the national economy, and it does contribute to both jobs and prosperity locally and nationally. But the second issue is also sovereignty. You do want to have some sovereignty over your key equipment. So that
but
you
a lot
are
of the designs come from elsewhere. A lot of the components come from elsewhere. So there's only so much sovereignty you can buy.
Yeah, but simultaneously, you are putting these things together, and you are developing an expertise. And hopefully, over the course of developing an expertise, you can not only export it, but it also becomes, if you will, the intellectual property of the nation. So I think there's merit in developing in local communities these kinds of things. And you are absolutely right, though. You don't want to take an off-the-shelf ship. It's quite a bit cheaper.
So how do you think this is going to go forward then under your government? What is going to be and I realize you've been on the job for an hour, but what do you think is the process going forward? Because yes, it's over 30 years, this strategy, but decisions have to be made fairly soon.
I like the signals that the Prime Minister is giving these days with respect to Parliament taking back some of its own responsibilities, and so my colleagues and I will be on the Defence Committee. I'm assuming that this will be an issue that they may well want to delve into. I'm taking at face value the commitments that we made over the course of the campaign that we're going to be more open, more transparent, and that we're going to try to be able to compare apples to apples.
Do you think, James Bezan, that this country should be in the business of making ships in the first place? If this is what the costs are going to lead to, is it really worth it?
Well, we do believe, as a Conservative Party, that we should be building these ships here. I think the national procurement strategy that we came out with really takes into consideration that the shipbuilding industry had definitely taken a back seat for a number of years. It was time to move it into the 21st century.
Yeah, but this is where it led us.
Well,
it led us to a place where now ships are going to cost double what we thought they were going to have.
That's why we say, we need to make sure we take a hard look at this report and see what the numbers are saying and where the mistakes were made in the original budget process, and determining that was going to be $26 million to where now we're talking double that just on the cost of the build. But, we do want to develop this industry so that it's there ongoing, and so that as our Royal Canadian Navy and others need ships, that they can come either to Halifax or out to Vancouver and get that capability built there in a very efficient manner, and creating jobs and capabilities within our economy that we haven't had for a long time.
Randall?
Well, I guess I had the privilege of attending the National Defence Procurement Symposium yesterday in Ottawa, and industry representatives there would challenge the assumption that off-the-shelf ships or equipment is always cheaper from somewhere else, especially when you consider the over-the-lifetime use of that, plus the tax revenues that come back in from that economic activity. So I would disagree from the very beginning with the premise that we might have been able to get these cheaper. What the problem is here is the government procurement process and the way it estimates costs, the way it projects costs, and the way it's really failed Canadians to get the equipment delivered on time. Now, I hope the answer from the Liberals isn't just going to be governing is hard. Right? We're going to have to work together here to solve this problem, because the Navy needs ships and they need them in a timely fashion. Well,
I'll leave it on this, John McKay. Is that something then that you're going to address, how the procurement process unfolds? I know that Judy Foote is partly in charge of that as well. Do we need an overhaul of how this is happening? Because the military tend to come up with a list of best case scenarios, and then someone at some point has to say you're not getting everything you want.
Yeah. And there do need to be some hard decisions made. I don't disagree with my colleagues in terms of the procurement process. Leaves something to be desired. There does seem to be a lot of cooks trying to make this soup, and at some point or another, the government's going to have to come down hard on say, this is the ship we get, this is the amount of money we're prepared to spend, and we want a hard timeline.
Okay, you're all getting along for now. Let's see how long.
Yeah, well, I'm counting on you, Rosie, to stir things up.
All right, that's fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you, gentlemen. John McKay, James Bezan, and Randall Garrison.